Hello to all of you from around the world. I want to welcome you again to another edition of Soulivity Today, broadcasting live from our studio right here in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., and on KMET 1490 AM radio in Southern California. My name is Brian Wesley Johnson, and we have a very special show for you today. Now, in just under 3 short months, people from around the world will be remembering an event that shook the world.
December 21st, 1988. In a few short, violent moments, 270 people died. 11 of the victims were killed on the ground in Lockerbie when debris from Pan Am 103 rained down on their streets and homes. The aircraft, luggage and bodies were scattered over a wide area. People from 21 countries filled these coffins. 189 of them were American.
Now, Jennifer SANCHEZ and Sheila Applegate met at Syracuse University's study abroad program during that year, and their lives would forever be changed when a terrorist killed 35 of their friends and classmates in the bombing of Pan Am 103. Now, I want to remind you that this is one of the first terrorist attacks to kill U.S. citizens. And now 35 years later, with countless public bombings and school shootings, we will look back at their experience of healing grief and trauma under the public eye of the media. I mean, what have we learned? What can we do differently to support those grieving through the traumatic public loss of our loved ones? And so, ladies, I am so glad you're here to talk about this. I know that the roads you both have taken since this tragedy have not been easy. And so I sincerely appreciate both of your willingness to share today. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As I told you guys offline, as I was even preparing for the show today, it was emotional. I mean, Jennifer, you said this. It seems like a lifetime ago. I mean, we're talking 35 years. So I guess my first question to both of you, and I'll pose this to you first, Jennifer. Can you share what it was like for yourself to experience that trauma at such a young age? I mean, you were both in London at the time, correct? Yeah. So you found out about this while you were in London. Give the backstory first before you get into that. Like why you were still in London at that time.
So back then, that was my junior year of college, and I had decided to study abroad and went over with my college roommate at the time. So the two of us decided to go. And when we left, we decided we were going to stay through the holiday, that we wanted to stay as long as we could and come back for our spring semester. When we got there, we had to get our own apartments. Part of the program was you kind of had to get your own housing. So we hooked up with 2 other girls and 4 of us got an apartment. And the other 2 were booked on that plane because that was the last plane before the holiday that you could pre-book, like when we left, right? So, and kind of the logistics of the program. That's why so many Syracuse students were on that plane. So 2 of our roommates were booked on the plane, and one of them decide to come with us. We decided we were going to go to France or something. And so one was on the plane, one was not on the plane. So we were in France. We didn't speak
Wow.
French. We didn't read newspapers. We had no idea. And we had no idea
Wow.
what had happened. So, we didn't have cell
Wow.
phones.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
after the
88.
bombing,
Yeah.
we didn't even know. I mean, so our families hadn't heard from us for 3 or 4 days afterwards.
Oh my
And
gosh.
yeah, it wasn't until we were coming back. I think I had a Syracuse sweatshirt on, and somebody we took the ferry over. Somebody on the ferry said, "Hey, did you hear what happened?" Like, kind of chatting you up kind of thing. And that's how we found out. But then we were on a boat for the next how many hours, what is it, like a 14-hour ride or something. And so it wasn't until we got back to London that we all called our parents. We were all on phones in the middle of like the train station, payphones, trying to
Right.
call our
Right.
parents and be like, hey, but we didn't
Wow.
understand. So we called saying, hey, did you hear what happened? And our parents were like, did we hear what happened? It was very emotional, right? Us realizing the gravity of what had happened in the media and the public, we just had no idea. So,
Mm. So, wow. That's blowing me away more because, again, you think 35 years ago, again, you were saying there's no cell phones. I think we had pagers, maybe. We may have had pagers, but not international ones. The
Right.
only way to reach people were cell phones. I mean, were through pay phones.
Right.
And those were just
Right.
scattered around. And we didn't have cable yet, right? Cable news was not a big thing yet. CNN was just born at like maybe a couple of years in. Sheila, what about you? What was your experience at that time?
Well, I was staying in England right from the beginning. I knew that I was staying also through the holidays
Okay.
because I had already done a high school semester or exchange program and was very close to the family. So I was spending Christmas with them and my boyfriend at the time, and then the husband and father of my kids now. But he was coming over, and then we traveled Germany and Austria during that time. So we were Daryl, my friend that was like my sister, we were at her friend's house hanging out with some of her friends, and the friend's mom came into the room and went to the liquor cabinet because she had to get liquor for her husband because he had been with people that afternoon who were on the plane. And so she mentioned,
Oh,
so she tells
wow.
us about it in the sort of trauma of her husband, and I'm sitting in the room, and there was this moment where I think everyone was in denial, and I was like, Daryl, all of my friends were there, like that plane. And so I'm gonna cry thinking about it. So we went home, but then I think we contacted my parents probably. My parents were nervous because I had sent a Christmas card to them that said the lyrics to I'll Be Home for Christmas, if only in my dreams. And so
Oh
they
my
were afraid that
goodness.
I had changed plans or something, that fear that's in there. And
Right.
then it was a matter of I just remember a period of days where people were calling because we couldn't get the names of people, So I
Right.
remember one conversation where Rich's mom called me and read the first list. And I remember just hearing the names over and over. And there were certain people that I was the closest to that I was asking about. They didn't have the answers. And so then I do remember maybe a day or so later, they called and started listing the names. And I remember just like collapsing to the floor and then them taking the phone from me.
Wow.
So, and then the other interesting thing, Jen said that her roommate had decided not to go on one of them. I had the opposite. I was talking to a friend who was in our building, in our apartments, and another of her roommates was asking her to change to get on the flight. And I was encouraging her not to stay for a day with me and hang out. And she chose to go on the flight. So there was a lot of these either, movement of people, I guess, and who ended up on that flight.
And just to let some of our maybe our younger viewers know, we talked about the technology changes. It was very easy to change flights back then, right? You could just
Yeah, you weren't covering the cost.
Yeah, if you wanted to cover the costs, which was typically minimal. I mean, airlines typically, if you changed your flight, it wasn't like the big change fees and stuff like now. As long as they had availability and in terms of space, and that kind of thing, it was a modest change because it was looked like, well, you paid for the ticket, so a ticket's a ticket, right? And so you could just do that. Tell me, well, actually, why don't we take a quick break? Because we're going to start another conversation, because I want to go into the days after that, where this was a huge, huge story. And that, the major networks were covering this 24/7 for what was the wreckage, who was there, they had people on the ground and all that kind of stuff. And I want to get your experience of that, like the days after, and what was happening with you, and when you guys finally connected with your families in person and that kind of thing. So listen, everyone, we're going to take a quick break. We've got more of this important show today here on Soulivity Today, talking about remembering Pan Am 103, but from an empowering way, from two people who really have a beautiful story to tell, who, went through this firsthand and from a completely different point of view that I think all of us can appreciate. So we will be right back in about 2 minutes.
6 years ago, when I started Soulivity, my vision was to support everyone in improving their life through the discovery of their passion and purpose, so they could become the best version of themselves, to battle fear and ignorance, and create a better world today. Get inspired to live your passion and purpose. Visit Soulivity.com now.
Do you see me kneeling on this dual roller called Parasetter? It's actually comfortable because of this channel and the softness of the special foam. It feels like my kneecaps are being massaged. When I lie down, my spine is housed in this channel, while the convex rollers massage my muscles. They let go and lengthen. There's a traction effect from my head on the headrest and my mid-back from the rib wrap, which hugs me. When I start the breathing sequence, I feel calm because my cortisol levels are dropping. Lower cortisol means bye-bye constant hunger. Parasetter is 40 inches long and much more comfortable than old-style rollers, but it weighs only 10 ounces. Parasetter, just like Pilates was, is no longer an insider secret. Do yourself a favor. Reset your parasympathetic nervous system. Defeat stress. Lying, sitting, kneeling, or standing. This unique patented roller helps everyone.
Hey there, we're back here with more here on Soulivity Today. We're remembering the bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 on its 35th anniversary. I have Jennifer SANCHEZ, a family and youth community activist, with us, along with Sheila Applegate, who's the host of Consciously Awesome Living right here on Soulivity TV. Both of you were students of the study abroad program that was in Europe at the time, where 35 of your classmates were killed on this flight. My question to you is, what were the days after the disaster, when you're coming back home, and now not only you're having to deal with the beginning of your own grief around this, but the media blitz that was happening during that time? Because I remember it like yesterday. I mean, it was on all the networks all the time, like it was breaking news, when it, for weeks. Sheila, I'll go to you first.
As we're reminiscing, I remember that when I came home, so first the media I was getting was in UK. So it was more about Lockerbie and some of the about the students and the people on the plane. There was also, I want to say that, like, we didn't know what video you were going to show. So it's interesting to me how triggering these things still are. Because that, even though to people that's a 35-year-old video, like those were our friends and our friends' belongings in that debris. So it's still much more intense than you would realize, even though it's so long. And the media hasn't, it's let up tremendously, but it didn't go away. There is always still media about it. So out of the blue coming up, or definitely on the anniversary. But one of the things I remember when I returned home was the number of people that greeted me at the airport. There was like 30 people there to greet me. And like, I don't know if it was comforting or not. It was just overwhelming, because it's the statement. I mean, I know it was their gratitude that I wasn't dead. So it was just this very weird experience. And then it's pretty much a blur. I remember back in the next semester, my roommates not knowing what to do with me. I think Jen and I got even closer then. The people who were returning had this little bubble of understanding with each other, I think. What do you think, Jen?
Absolutely. I mean, and I think the same thing. My initial experience was delayed because we were not in the UK. We were not in an English speaking country, right? So when we got back to the UK, we had given up our apartment. And so we had made some friends who were from our neighborhood. And, it's amazing the generosity of essentially strangers, and so those first, like, through Christmas, we were just, the community that we made that we barely knew just wrapped their arms around us and took care of us. And I don't remember, it's all a blur. I mean, one, it was a long time ago, but two, I think in many ways, a lot of it's sort of blocked out, because it was so intense. And the layers of loss, like, we lost our roommate and then also a boyfriend of one of our other roommates. So there was these intense friendships, and then a lot of acquaintances, right? And so it was almost hard, because there were some people, and this is something I kind of struggled with for a long time, that there were a group of people that I was very close to, and the trauma and the grief was very intense. And then there were other people who you kind of knew, and had they passed, you would have had feelings about it. But in the connection of all the loss, you didn't feel the same loss for all the people. And that was difficult, actually, because I think you had to categorize or bucket your loss, because it was just too much. It was too many people. And I think that's part of, these mass events. They're so layered. It's not one feeling for everybody. And I don't know that I had that complexity of emotional awareness at that time in my life. And
Now,
I
how
felt
old were
guilt. you know.
How old were each of you? Sheila, how old were you?
Let's see. I guess
I
22,
think we were 20.
20, no, 20. Yeah, we would
I
be
So
20.
each of
turned
you were
20.
your, wow.
I
20.
turned
Yeah,
20.
because we
No,
were juniors. Yeah, I would have turned 20 in
That makes
in
sense.
England.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
study abroad programs, typically you got to be in your junior,
It was
senior
our
year.
junior
So that,
year. Yeah.
did you guys have to do
First semester of your
did you have to do any media interviews at all? Either one of you?
I did.
You did.
I did, but
I
not until we
I
came
think I
back.
did. Yeah. I
Not until
think
you came
because I
back.
was the only social work. Jen wasn't her major wasn't social work at the time. But so I was the only social work student to return, and so I had to speak at the memorial for them, and I believe that there was press that interviewed me there, if I remember right.
You know, I worked in the school system in Detroit, and there would always be sometime during the year a tragic event, right? Where it might have been one person who was like well loved, and students, we'd have we'd have grief counselors and stuff for students and that kind of thing. I cannot imagine the grieving process for both of you, because it wasn't just one person. It's one
Right.
event, but it was not only 35 of your fellow students, it was at all the same school. Sheila, you just talked about that it was people who were in your class so it's like this layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of connections that you all had to go through in terms of your grieving. I just wanted to point that out, how complex this was for each of you. Yeah, go ahead. I think Sheila, did you have
I
something?
was just going to say, in the school there, when we're talking about the study abroad school, was one building, relatively small. So you walked
Wow.
by everybody. We all got our mail in the same mailroom, because back then, that was the only way to communicate. And so
Right.
there wasn't anyone we didn't know. It was just the degree to which we knew them and our experiences.
Exactly.
Wow.
And I also think then there wasn't, the school didn't provide us counseling or grief. There was no sort of like special anything. You were very much on your own, and there was no framework for understanding traumatic grief. I don't think our society was good for grief in
Right.
general. I still think we have a long way to go, but there was no framework for traumatic grief or this kind of complexity. So and I think that's part of why we kind of connected with each other, was because you didn't feel understood in any way, shape, or form. And you felt kind of
Right.
like an oddity. People were either very curious or wanted to, didn't know what to say to you, so kind of left you alone. And in both
Right.
cases, it was very uncomfortable, so I do think, I think about that time and how that time changed the course of my life in a positive way, in terms of connecting with Sheila and the closeness of our friendship, and some people that I went through experiences with, but then also changed fundamentally relationships in other ways that you just couldn't communicate anymore.
Wow.
Yeah.
I am I am even more appreciative of both of you being here, because I don't know how I would have gotten through that without. It seems as though you both created a support system for yourself, and that you connected with each other, you connected with other people, and I'm shocked that there was no other support given by like the school or anything like that. Maybe everybody was traumatized and kind of in a state of just shock of everything. Listen,
I
why
do
don't we
think
take a
my
yeah,
school of
yeah.
social work did. I think the
Oh,
social
they
work
did?
professors were watching out for me, if I remember
Okay.
correctly, and especially the
Okay.
one professor that came back with us. So I'll give them
Okay.
credit. Don't want to,
Why don't we
but
take a
that's just
break?
me. I was the only one.
Yeah. Why don't we take a break? And listen, we'll be right back with more of Soulivity today, remembering uh, those loved ones from Pan Am 103 who are on the other side of the veil, but also those of you who, like Sheila and Jennifer, who are still with us today. Soulivity today is brought to you by Happy Travelers Tours and Old Vine Wine Tours. You can find all of the Satana products at our Go shop at go.soulivity.com.
Have you ever asked the question, if I was to be anything, what would I be? Regardless of money, regardless of status, beyond popularity and fame, living your passion, feeling your life has purpose. Soulivity is a space to nurture that which lives in all of us. A place where work can become play, and doing what we love creates the dreams of a lifetime.
Hey, we're back here with more on Soulivity today. We're remembering the bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 on its 35th anniversary. Jennifer and Sheila, listen, next question to you, which I think, it's not necessarily a loaded question, but it's a really, really good one. And that is, how has this experience impacted your life? I mean, just, I know it forever changed you, right?
Yeah.
Jennifer, what are some of the ways that it's impacted you?
I mean, as I've gotten older, I think I recognize that your life unfolds as it unfolds. And I think in the moment, trying to find meaning of why, and realizing there's no real answer to the why. It just is. Your life is what it is in some
Yeah.
way, right? And I think having had that experience, I do a lot of work with kids in the child welfare system, kids and families. And one of the things that I think how it's impacted me is really a sensitivity to the impact of grief and of trauma, and recognizing in my work a lot of people have a lot of unresolved grief, and trauma in lots of different capacities, and that there's not really a place to there hasn't always been a place to release that. I think we're getting better. I see it in my field. We're getting better at understanding and giving people space and holding space, and not trying to fix people. I mean,
Yeah.
like Sheila, I still get teary. It in many ways
Of
is
course.
this experience feels like it was yesterday. It is not
Oh,
Right.
all taken care of. I live with it. I move through it. There are days and months that go by I don't think about it. It's still very alive in who I am. So I don't
mhm.
know that our society is comfortable with people who have that sensitivity to death, to loss, to trauma. And so you feel like an oddity. And
Yeah.
so being
Mhm.
able, it's impacted me in that I think I have a sensitivity and a comfort with the uncomfortable
Right.
because I live with it.
Right. Right.
Mm.
Sheila, what about you?
I like, Jen, what you just said, a comfort with the uncomfortable, because I think it is something that we learned early on, and it really doesn't go away. You don't know when it's going to show up. In the I want to say earlier years, but well into my parenthood with my kids growing up, you're looking at December 21st. So, and the media still acknowledges it. At least here, I
Mm.
live still in Syracuse.
Oh, yeah.
So you can't get through December 21st without that coming up. So,
Right.
as a mom of young kids, a few days before Christmas, and all the grief
Yeah.
is all over the place again. Getting on airplanes, I have never been afraid, really. Well, I guess that wouldn't be true. I had a hard time saying goodbye to my children, when I had to travel, like, without
Mhm.
them on airplanes,
Mm, mm, mhm.
and through far into it, learned that I couldn't let them go to the airport with me because it was too hard. So I would have to, if I hopefully say goodbye to them the night before and then get up for an early flight while they were sleeping. And so it's like weird things that you don't really think about. And then it just comes up out of the blue and hits you. So for Sarah, my daughter's parents' weekend at SUNY Purchase, so that's a school for arts. And so the one of the big events there, it's not a sports school, was a play. And the
Wow.
play was about Pan Am 103.
Oh.
So
Mm.
she calls me up
Wow.
early on and she's like, "Mom, this is what's happening." And I was, I'm like, "Oh God," like, I don't know. I said, "Whatever you want to do, Sarah, whatever you want to do." And she made the choice. I said, "I will do it. I will go see it. I will, whatever you want to do." And she made the choice to come home for the weekend instead. So, like, it's just, you just don't know. I was watching Star Trek last week, Discovery, or Deep Space Nine, and they had a thing where Earth had, a spaceship or a teleporter. It wasn't called a plane anymore, but, it was bombed, and it was, like, their first time experiencing it in that age,
Wow. Wow.
and I was like, "When did this air?" And I looked it up, and it was so identical to the story. It was so clear. It
Wow.
was
Mhm.
it was written right after Pan Am 103, so you just don't know where it's gonna show up. And I think about people today that are, so many people now have experienced these losses and this trauma, and I don't
Mhm.
know if we got better or worse at helping them as a collective. I
You
think
know,
I don't know that we
uh,
got better.
yeah, and again, that's why we're doing the show, right? I mean, we're bringing something that is part of our history now, right, or has been chosen as part of our history, with this flight, and bring to the forefront of, one, how did we react to it, right? And
Mhm.
basically, we kind of reacted to it, as a society, with it being a news story, but not necessarily it being something that's supportive to the families, to the people who lost loved ones, and that kind of thing, where they can go, they're acknowledged. Listen, we understand you're grieving. It's okay that you're grieving. Um, you tell us what you need, right? We're just going to be here. We're going to surround you with just support. We're not going to try to fix you, to your point, Jennifer, because I think that happens a lot too, right? Where we go through some type of trauma and the first reaction is, oh, we'll shake it off. We'll get, and the other sayings, when God closes a door, he opens a window, and all the other stuff that's completely not helpful at the time for some of us, right?
Right.
So we're talking about that. I mean, we have to have these conversations about, because we grieve not just about, I mean, I think, Sheila, you were on the show with us where we were talking about grief, and we just don't grieve about when people die. We grieve about a whole lot of stuff. And society, the norm is we don't allow ourselves to do that. That if you do that, you are weak, right? You're not supposed to show weakness. You're supposed to be strong and move through this with, emotional intelligence and all this kind of stuff, which is, we all grieve the way we're going to grieve, period. I want to try to continue this thread. We'll kind of go through our break because I think we're at a good point where I want to ask, if Sheila, if you could go back, and I won't say change, I'll say add, right? You can't change things. What would be one or two things that you would have liked to have seen happen for you during that time period, and then moving forward? And it can even include media, right? Because the media just cares about the story. But what would be?
Think,
yeah.
Well, I think media is such a big part of it. So, if there's people listening who are in the media or younger people going into it, and hopefully they have some discernment, the sensationalism, which I think is just amplified over the years of it, because what they're trying to do is create a scenario where people have an emotional impact to it. But when you are one of the people, you're already at heightened emotions. And so having that all over the place, I can't even imagine now. I get so frustrated when I go to get gas or go to the bank and there's news on the screens. Like, we have to watch it everywhere now. I didn't realize until right now why I'm so irritated. But imagine if you had just gone through this and every single thing you do. So the people experience this now. Those are the things that they're having to face everywhere whenever they go on social media. It's just amplified and worse. And Jen, you had said, I think you mentioned this to me when we were talking, because there was one mom who I believe you said was the first one to be interviewed, and she was very emotional, and her path really went to anger and activism. And you wonder what the impact of that initial reaching for the drama that media might have done that impacted the life. Were you talking about that, Jen? Did you say that?
I don't know, but I know, so like the parents of the two folks that I was closest to, they really responded in very different ways. And that was another layer too, right? Of how you're dealing with the other people dealing with things. And I think that's one of the things that happens, maybe my personality, but you're in the midst of your own grief, but then you're helping people through their grief. And and sometimes it was even like my parents had their own emotion about the fear of losing me and what I experienced. And now you're helping them deal with their stuff rather than them helping you deal with your stuff, And I think that's a very common place. So yeah, I found, and I think the other thing that layered with this was it was a geopolitical issue, right? It was an international terrorist bombing that our friends just had the bad luck of being on. Like, we had nothing to do with the scenario that created the conflict that was in this action, right? But we were the ones who paid the price, right? So there were some parents who were very angry and wanting to I had one parent wanting to pull me in and wanting me to be in the spotlight and, all of that. And there was another parent, she ended up, I mean, her story was pretty amazing because she lost her oldest child a year before. She died on a health issue while she was traveling abroad. Then her son was killed the next year on this plane.
Oh,
So she lost both of her children. And she ended
wow.
up over time, not right away, but over time, she adopted a family of children who lost their parents. And the sense of, you need parents, I'm not ready to not be a mom. And that's how she healed through her process, which seemed like a very healthy approach, where others just dove into the darkness of trying to get answers and understanding and anger. And it was difficult.
Wow. 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 What would have been supportive to each of you? I mean, what would have been, like, even today, how can we support you in what will be part of your lives forever? I just kind of see this. I mean, it take different forms, but Jennifer, how would you answer that question, if anything?
I think in the time, probably space. I don't think I was ready to
Mm,
be a spokesperson
mm,
at 20
mm.
years
Right.
old about my feelings and
Yeah,
my loss you know,
yeah,
um, and I think over time, it's funny, like there are there are people in my life that I have never shared this experience with, and
mm,
there are times and points in my life that I just did not talk about it. Um, and so I think there's having safe place to speak of it without it being, um, you know, this sense of like you share it and people are like, oh, I get you. And it's like, no, you don't. This isn't the only experience of my life. It was one, and it's a huge one, but it
right,
was not the only thing that defined me as a human being, right?
right, right,
Um, so I think there needs to be safe space to speak
Mhm.
of it in all its ugliness and all its messiness and all
right,
its everything, and
right,
its own complexity. And there's
right.
not a lot of space. And not
Wow.
necessarily just therapy, right? It's not just
Right,
counseling and therapy. That's helpful.
right.
But there needs to be some other spaces of
Mhm.
finding joy. I mean, one of the things that I have really enjoyed is Dia de los Muertos, right? So that comes at the beginning of
Mm.
November.
Mm-hmm.
And, my kids know the story of my friend's name. We called her Chutch. So my kids know Chutch. I have a picture of her on my altar. I talk about her every year. And Chris too. And that's been really important to just remember people and the stories and not have
Mhm.
them wiped out of life.
Right, 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 right. Sheila, what about you?
I really like what Jen said about remember the people and the stories. I think that we so often, even on social media, 9/11 and all of the earlier shootings in schools and then more, people will post about the anniversary or something like that. And it feels surface. It feels almost disrespectful to me sometimes, even though people
Yeah,
are kind hearted. It's like, that's an important day for those people. Remembering that these are real people and
right,
keeping their spirit alive, keeping who they really are alive, letting the people who loved them tell those stories, not generalized reflections or, um, sometimes like on social media, I wonder, are you just posting that because you know that it'll trend on this day? It'll get in, or are
right,
you really feeling something? It's not. necessary to always remember. The people who were there are going to remember. We aren't forgetting. It feels really good when the people who knew me then reach out during that time, or when people really understand, acknowledge it. That feels good. Definitely not making it political on that day, which, even last year they brought in somebody to custody. They had him in custody months before, but they brought him in right in time for the anniversary. That was a planned political stunt, and it just hurts like anything. Yeah.
Right.
We don't need to do that,
Wow.
people.
Wow.
And I know the average person listening isn't doing those things, but acknowledge that that's the thing. Don't repost something like that, because it's not helpful to the people. Things like that.
And I also think that what you both are talking about are things that people can take into their lives with other people that they're connected to when them themselves are going through some grieving process, or they see a loved one or a friend going through the grieving process. That a lot of times, all that those people want you to do is not necessarily leave them alone, but just send quiet love and support as they go through it. That they don't need you to fix it. They don't need you to rush in and all this kind of thing. I'm just remembering one of the most supportive things that I remember growing up, especially having roots in the South, is that people would just bring you food, right? They just, hey, we're with you. Here's some food. Because you wouldn't even, because during those times you don't even feel like cooking. You don't feel like eating, but you have food in the house so that you can eat when you're ready to eat, right? And you don't have to worry about it. That's a beautiful way of quietly giving some support, right?
Right.
Because I love what you said, Jennifer, around that space. Sometimes it's just so much, right? Especially with this kind of tragedy, it was so much, and that it continues year after year after year after year after year, where you're hearing this and it's in the news and all this kind of thing. Wow, I thank you so much for being here, both of you, and sharing this experience. I am grateful beyond words that we were able to talk about this today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For having
it's
the
helpful to talk about it.
Yeah.
I want to just put this out there to people that if you want to support the remembrance of Pan Am Flight 103, but in a beautiful and not evasive kind of way, go to the Pan Am 103 Lockerbie Legacy Foundation. That's online at www.pa103ll.org. That's www.pa103ll.org. Ladies, again, thank you for being here. We're going to take just like, maybe not, I was going to say we're going to take a quick break, but we're almost at the end of the show. Probably got to move on to some shameless plugs here. Sheila, yeah, we've got a great program that we're both engaged in called Joy Keepers. And tomorrow, again, this will be a beautiful day, beautiful way for you to honor these people, right? And this is with the Joy Keepers Cafe that's coming up on September 27th. Can you tell people a little bit more about this?
Yes. So on the fourth Wednesday of every month, we get together over Zoom with people from all around the world. It's at 11 a.m. New York time. And we just come together for a conversation and then a meditation on joy. And then we chat a little bit more about that. And it's very simple. It happens within an hour. It is free. You just have to reserve your seat to get the link for the Zoom. And once you do sign up, you'll start getting the links every month so you can pop in easily anytime. So that's at thejoykeepers.com. www.soulivity.org/cafe. And we hope you join us.
Yay! I love it. I love it. That would be that. I think that's the type of celebrations people need to have, right? Celebrating
Yeah.
people's life through experiencing joy and that kind of thing, and then giving that celebration to people in that way. Jennifer, do you have anything that's going on? I mean, you're always out here fighting in the community for families and youth. What's happening in your neck of the woods?
Well, so I do work in child welfare, and I do work a lot of work in Texas. And so there's a lot, the systems are changing, and how we perceive, building these kinds of systems to protect people. I think we're getting better at understanding that sometimes the things we do don't have the intent that we want them to have. And so really thinking differently. And, it's exciting to see kids having more voice, families having more voice. And, that's the space that I enjoy, is really bringing folks to the table who haven't always had a seat at the table to define and dictate their own lives. Our systems are huge and people get caught up in it. So it is exciting to see when there are those opportunities.
Wow. Well, would you come back and maybe we can talk about that on a show, because I know that there's a lot of things happening, especially like the migrant crisis that's there. I used to live in Texas, and it's always been a major issue. But I think what's lost is the children and the families that are part of the issue, and that people lose sight that these are actually people and they're going through a lot of stuff, and they're not just doing this stuff just because. And there's other things happening around that state that's happening too that's people need to know about. So thank you. Listen, I just want to remind people to follow us on social media, where you can find out more information about Soulivity and get great tips and read great content about what's happening in our neck of the woods, as I said to Jennifer, in our neck of the woods here at Soulivity. And we want to say thank you to you for being here for another edition of Soulivity today. We hope that you come back and join us every Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern for our live broadcast, or you can listen to us at 8 a.m. Pacific time on KMET 1490 AM radio out in California for all of you guys out on the West Coast. It's 8 a.m. Pacific time for all of you guys out on the West Coast. So thanks again for being with us, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.
This work is subject to copyright owned by Affinity Global LLC. Any reproduction or republication of all or part of this is expressly prohibited unless Affinity Global LLC has explicitly granted